We want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we saw in the survey and in our work. And as Cedric said, we're going to kind of go broad and go deep. I'll give you the national view, and then he'll give you the Northern Colorado specifics. So the first thing we found is that we're not back to pre-pandemic levels of student satisfaction. And of course, it's not about going back, right? It's a new reality. We want to move forward. But I think we want to have that same level of satisfaction of performance. And one way to measure that is a net promoter score. You've probably all been asked these questions, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend? If you're a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. If you're a 1 through 6, you're a detractor. 7 and 8, you're a neutral. So if you subtract the detractors from the promoters, you should really get something in the 30 to 70 range. We're kind of stuck at 16 nationally. We were at 21 before that. Obviously, 2020 took a hit. We actually had a negative net promoter score, which is more associated with cable companies. And we can do better, and we are better than that, I think. The other thing we found, and this is maybe the most interesting thing of the white paper, which we're going to provide a link to. It's open access, so we'll provide a link to that shortly. But students' sense of personal growth is actually the best indicator of their overall satisfaction. It has the highest correlation with all the other aspects of their experience. And it turns out that that self-reported sense of growth, and we look at it, we ask people about their confidence, about their career exploration, about solving real-world problems, about working on a team, about gaining skills, knowledge. It turns out that that growth is pretty uneven. Women feel like they're growing more than men, student athletes more so than non-athletes. Interestingly, adult learners more than those under 24. Students with parents feel like they're growing more. Kind of cool. Nice to have that as a bright spot. Students at private institutions more so than publics. So this focus on growth is a really interesting way to move the needle in terms of student experience, but it's not even. The other thing where we found some big gaps is for students with disabilities. So about 20% of students have a self-reported disability, and according to the National Center for Students with Disabilities. And of those students, there are big gaps. Our survey tracks 68 different dimensions of student experience. 37 of them, there's a statistical deficit between the satisfaction ratings of students with disabilities and those without. The biggest gaps are around basic needs, time management, dining facilities, student orientation, internship and career options. So if we want to move the needle on student experience and we want to serve all our students, make college work for all students, this is definitely a place we need to focus. And we hinted at this earlier. Students are looking for this holistic experience. They're looking for more than classes, and of course, classes relate to things in and out of the classroom, right? You can pursue a leadership opportunity in something that relates to your major or your focus. But we found some of the biggest areas for opportunity are around advising, around research support, internship, career options, leadership, mentoring, all these things that help round out the experience and provide a more holistic experience, much of which you all are charged with improving and shepherding. So now we're going to transition from talking about challenges to some potential solutions, things that Cedric's doing, things that we're doing across the country, and then we'll do another opportunity for you all to talk to each other. So let's get into some of these solutions and strategies.
So one of the things I want to share because of our conversation, we did something that, I guess many campuses thought was a foreign concept. We actually asked students, what are your concerns? And help us provide a solution to meet your concerns. And when you compare just this, the thing they told us was My institution is the Virgin HSI institution, but we didn't have any Spanish speakers on our campus. Well, 40% of our students identify as Latinx. And so they told us we need to have things in at least 2 languages because their parents speak Spanish, but they speak English. That was a foreign concept just for our institution, so we changed our entire advising structure to fit the need of our students. And this is an example of how we were very intentional, very intrusive in our advising, where we communicate not just to the students, but we also communicate to their parents, the expectation. Let's kind of just go through the sequence of how that has occurred. That it resulted in a 6% increase in 1 year of our first year retention of this past year. So this kind of just give you an example of listening to students, having an enterprise approach to you, meeting students' needs. So it's not necessarily more funds, it is effectively using the funds you have and repurposing them to meet the needs.
So earlier I was talking about real-world projects as a challenge, but they're also a solution, because these are ways when students get to apply what they're learning in the classroom out in the world. This was something they weren't terribly satisfied with in our survey, and other surveys have found the same. In fact, Wiley did a survey recently where it was about 80% of students thought these were important, but then when they asked faculty, and about 30% of faculty offered them. So there's definitely a disconnect, and there's an opportunity to apply, and that, you know, we all learn through application. And one of my favorite projects, I've worked with more than 100 colleges and universities, but we did a project with University of Rochester, and our research uncovered that there were tons of students with ideas, but those ideas didn't necessarily have a home in, say, the entrepreneurship center at the business school or the entrepreneurship club, because maybe they didn't want to start a company, they wanted to start a film series or do a volunteer project or do some kind of service learning, civic engagement project. So we created the iZone, where students could come together, they could get training, they could find teammates, they could meet with mentors, they could showcase their work and create impact, economic, cultural, and community. Earlier, somebody mentioned students say they want in-person classes and then they enroll for ones that are online. We asked students about their modality preferences, and it turns out about 40%, 43 to be precise, want fully face-to-face, and about 20% want fully online, and then there's 40% in the middle there that expect some form of blended or hybrid, blended being maybe like flipped classroom, and hybrid meaning you could join synchronously or asynchronously, some folks in the room, some folks online. And so thinking about this flexibility, I think is going to be so important. One opportunity to do that, we've been working with the Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon for a while about providing not just flexible spaces, but technology and programs so that you can meet students where they are, students with different needs, different kinds of programs. And that's been really successful for them. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and it maybe connects to real world projects and flexibility in learning, is the opportunity to connect careers and classes. And I feel like there's a real sea change going on, where instead of thinking about career exploration as this separate thing you do in spare time that you don't have, you actually integrate it with your classes. It is a class, there's a visit, there's a class visit. Or Metro State, we did a student experience assessment for them, and we highlighted this class career disconnect as an opportunity area and came up with this idea of careers in the classroom. And it's one of these rare moments when you can make 1 + 1 = 3, because it was then an opportunity to engage alumni. So we created a whole way to bring alumni into the classroom to talk about their work, to talk about their path, and students could, in a way, they could kind of get a glimpse of their future. And then they're much more engaged in their coursework, and they can see where it might lead. And maybe that alum needs an intern this summer, or maybe they have a full-time role. And finally, we think libraries are a great opportunity for transformation because they're a way to meet students where they are. And as students do more than write papers and take tests, as they do projects and as they need support, libraries can become these hubs for belonging, for creativity, for student services. You can get help on a presentation, get help analyzing data, get help with supplemental instruction, like if you're failing your STEM classes, as was mentioned earlier, time management, study skills, all these things. Temple's new library is one of these next generation libraries because it brings together all these different supports and shows students how they're related. So they're not experiencing this help in silos, right? Because you go to a librarian to find help with a source, and they see that your thesis needs clarification. You go to the writing center, and they see that the graph in figure 1 needs some fine tuning, and you can go to the data lab.